inbox pings with a message from a deposed foreign royal, promising millions of dollars in exchange for a temporary bank account number and a modest transfer fee. It is the oldest joke on the internet, a cultural punchline that seems too absurd to trap anyone with a modicum of digital literacy. Yet, behind this seemingly laughable facade lies a multi-billion-dollar illicit industry that continues to devastate lives across the globe. The FBI and international investigators tracking global financial crime note that this specific type of deception still extracts hundreds of millions of dollars annually from unsuspecting individuals. The persistence of the Nigerian prince scam defies logic until one realizes that its inherent absurdity is not a flaw in the design, but rather a highly sophisticated filtering mechanism. By examining the mechanics of this enduring deception, a chilling reality emerges about the vulnerabilities hardwired into human cognition. Long before the internet revolutionized global communication, the foundational architecture of this deception was already perfected in the physical world. In the late 18th century, the Spanish prisoner swindle operated on the exact same premise, utilizing handwritten letters smuggled by maritime couriers. The sender claimed to be a wealthy aristocrat languishing in a foreign prison, desperately needing a benefactor to front the bail money in exchange for a massive share of a hidden fortune. The transition from parchment to broadband simply accelerated the velocity of the fraud, allowing perpetrators to cast a global net with near zero overhead costs. Today, this methodology is legally classified as advance fee fraud, a scheme where a victim is persuaded to pay money upfront on the promise of a significantly larger payout that never materializes. It is colloquially known as 419 fraud, a moniker derived directly from the section of the Nigerian criminal code that specifically addresses obtaining property by false pretenses. The modern execution of 419 fraud operates as a high-volume, low-yield numbers game that relies on the sheer scale of automated email distribution. A criminal syndicate might send out 300,000 identical emails in a single afternoon, fully expecting that 299,000 recipients will instantly recognize the message as spam and delete it. The poorly written prose, the excessive capitalization, and the outlandish royal titles are intentionally deployed to repel skeptical, critical thinkers immediately. The perpetrators do not want to waste their time attempting to manipulate individuals who will ask difficult questions or demand verifiable proof. Instead, the email acts as a psychological sieve, isolating the tiny fraction of the population who are sufficiently naive, desperate, or greedy to respond. Once a target replies to the initial message, the automated broadcast ends, and a highly personalized, intensely manipulative psychological operation begins. The architecture of the trap relies heavily on a concept known as social engineering, which is the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that may be used for fraudulent purposes. The fraudster, now operating one-on-one with the victim, begins to build a fabricated relationship grounded in manufactured urgency and forced secrecy. The victim is told that the transaction must remain absolutely confidential to prevent corrupt government officials or rogue bank managers from seizing the funds. This required secrecy effectively isolates the target from family members, financial advisors, or skeptical friends who might recognize the warning signs and intervene. The perpetrator masterfully plays the role of a desperate dependent, transferring the emotional weight of the fictitious millions directly onto the shoulders of the isolated victim. As the fabricated narrative progresses, the financial demands inevitably begin, always presented as minor, temporary hurdles blocking the massive final payout. First, it is a small processing fee for a foreign central bank, then a sudden bribe required by a customs official, followed by an unexpected tax levied by a fictitious regulatory agency. For the victim, the initial payment is often rationalized as a manageable risk, a small price to pay for life-changing wealth. However, once that first wire transfer is sent, the psychological dynamic shifts dramatically. The victim is no longer just chasing a windfall, they are desperately trying to validate the money they have already spent. This dynamic plunges them into the sunk cost fallacy, a cognitive bias where individuals continue a behavior or endeavor as a result of previously invested resources, regardless of the current evidence indicating that the endeavor is doomed. The structural weaknesses of the global financial system provide the perfect conduit for these illicit transfers. Traditional wire transfer services were originally designed to move money quickly and efficiently across borders for legitimate commerce, but their irreversible nature makes them an ideal tool for criminals. Once a victim authorizes a wire transfer to a foreign bank account, the funds are almost instantly withdrawn by money mules, leaving law enforcement with a dead end. In recent years, the integration of cryptocurrency has further anonymized the flow of stolen wealth, stripping away the few remaining regulatory checkpoints that traditional banks once provided. The frictionless nature of modern digital finance ensures that a victim can instantly liquidate their life savings and transfer it to an untraceable wallet controlled by a syndicate operating thousands of miles away. The individuals orchestrating these campaigns are rarely the lone, impoverished hackers depicted in popular media stereotypes. Many operate within highly organized, corporate-style syndicates that treat 419 fraud as a scalable enterprise. These groups employ specialized roles, including lead generators who harvest email addresses, closers who handle the direct communication with victims, and money launderers who obscure the financial trail. In West Africa, a subculture of cybercriminals known as Yahoo Boys emerged in the early 2000s, utilizing internet cafes to launch massive advance fee campaigns. Over time, these localized operations evolved into transnational criminal networks, sharing tactics, trading victim lists, and continuously refining their scripts to bypass spam filters and psychological defenses. They view their victims not as human beings, but as abstract revenue streams, entirely detached from the devastating consequences of their actions. Bringing these syndicates to justice presents a monumental challenge for international law enforcement agencies. The borderless nature of internet communication allows a fraudster in one hemisphere to exploit a victim in another, routing their communications through proxy servers located in a third country. When a victim finally realizes they have been defrauded and contacts local police, the responding officers frequently lack the jurisdiction, technical expertise, or resources to pursue perpetrators operating in entirely different legal systems. Extradition treaties are complex, and coordinating international task forces requires significant political will and financial investment. Consequently, the perpetrators operate with a high degree of impunity, knowing that the mathematical odds of facing criminal prosecution are overwhelmingly in their favor. Recognizing that the classic royal inheritance narrative has lost much of its efficacy, these syndicates have aggressively diversified their deceptive portfolios. The core mechanics of advance fee fraud have been seamlessly adapted into romance scams, where the fictitious prince is replaced by a fabricated military officer deployed overseas, or a wealthy oil rig engineer facing a sudden crisis. In these variations, the promise of a financial windfall is replaced by the promise of emotional connection and lifelong companionship. The fraudster spends months grooming the victim, exchanging daily messages and building deep emotional intimacy before the inevitable financial emergency strikes. The psychological devastation of a romance scam often eclipses the financial loss, as the victim must simultaneously mourn the loss of their life savings and the death of a deeply cherished, albeit entirely fictional, relationship. The collateral damage inflicted by these evolving campaigns is staggering, frequently resulting in total financial ruin for the targeted individuals. Victims routinely empty their retirement accounts, take out massive second mortgages, and borrow heavily from friends and family to meet the endless demands for phantom fees. When the credit lines are finally exhausted and the fraudster vanishes, the victim is left to face a shattered reality. Bankruptcies, foreclosures, and irreversible family estrangements are the standard outcomes of a successful 419 operation. In the most tragic cases, the overwhelming shame and insurmountable debt have driven victims to suicide, a grim testament to the lethal potential of an invisible adversary armed only with a keyboard and a deep understanding of human vulnerability. The exploitation does not necessarily end when the victim's bank accounts are drained. Syndicates frequently maintain detailed databases of individuals who have previously fallen for advance fee fraud, recognizing them as highly susceptible targets. Months or even years later, the victim may be targeted by a secondary deception known as a recovery room scam. In this scenario, the fraudster contacts the victim posing as a law enforcement official, a private investigator, or a government regulator, claiming that the stolen funds have been located and frozen. The victim is assured that their money will be fully returned, provided they pay a small upfront administrative fee or legal retainer. Desperate to recoup their losses and blinded by the hope of restitution, the victim is often manipulated into paying the very same syndicate that ruined them in the first place. This relentless cycle of victimization highlights a critical gap in consumer protection and digital literacy. While financial institutions have implemented sophisticated algorithms to detect unusual spending patterns, the ultimate authorization for a transfer always rests with the account holder. Fraudsters actively coach their victims on how to bypass bank security protocols, instructing them to lie to tellers about the purpose of the wire transfer or to claim the funds are for a legitimate real estate investment. The banks are caught in a difficult position, balancing the need to protect their clients from obvious fraud against the legal obligation to execute the explicit financial directives of the account holder. When a victim is thoroughly convinced by the scammer's narrative, no amount of institutional friction can stop them from eagerly handing over their wealth. The enduring success of these campaigns is fundamentally rooted in the weaponization of hope and the exploitation of cognitive blind spots. The scammers meticulously construct a reality where the victim is the hero of their own story, uniquely positioned to rescue a stranded individual or secure a generational fortune. This manufactured narrative triggers powerful neurochemical responses, flooding the victim's brain with dopamine as they anticipate the impending reward. This state of heightened emotional arousal actively suppresses the analytical, critical thinking centers of the brain. The victim stops evaluating the evidence objectively and instead begins searching for any possible justification to maintain the illusion. They become active participants in their own deception, fiercely defending the fraudster against the warnings of their own families. The legacy of the Spanish prisoner continues to cast a long, dark shadow over the modern digital landscape. Despite decades of public awareness campaigns, countless investigative reports, and the ubiquitous nature of the Nigerian prince punchline, the underlying mechanics of the fraud remain terrifyingly effective. The specific narratives will continue to adapt to current events, shifting from political refugees to pandemic relief funds to cryptocurrency investment opportunities. But the core exploitation of advance fee mechanics will never change. The persistence of this threat serves as a constant reminder that technological advancements do not eliminate human vulnerability. They merely provide new, highly efficient vectors for ancient deceptions. Combating this pervasive threat requires a fundamental shift in how society approaches digital security and psychological resilience. Technical solutions, such as advanced spam filters and biometric authentication, are necessary but ultimately insufficient against adversaries who target the human mind rather than the computer network. True prevention relies on widespread education regarding the specific tactics of social engineering. Individuals must be trained to recognize the universal red flags of fraud, including unsolicited requests for money, manufactured urgency, demands for absolute secrecy, and the use of untraceable payment methods. Financial literacy programs must expand beyond budgeting and investing to include rigorous training in defensive psychology, empowering consumers to pause, verify, and consult trusted third parties before initiating any high-stakes financial transaction. Furthermore, the global response to transnational cybercrime must evolve beyond the current fragmented, reactive approach. Law enforcement agencies require enhanced international cooperation, streamlined data sharing agreements, and specialized cyber task forces capable of tracking illicit financial flows across multiple jurisdictions. The burden of prevention must also be shared by the technology platforms and financial institutions that inadvertently facilitate these crimes. Stricter accountability for platforms that host fraudulent infrastructure and enhanced scrutiny of high-risk financial transfers could significantly disrupt the operational capabilities of these syndicates. However, these systemic changes move slowly, hampered by competing national interests and the relentless pace of technological innovation. Until these systemic vulnerabilities are addressed, the financial hemorrhage will continue unabated. A staggering $2.5 billion is lost annually to various forms of internet fraud, representing a massive transfer of wealth from vulnerable individuals to organized criminal networks. This illicit capital is frequently reinvested into expanding the syndicate's operations, funding the development of more sophisticated malware, purchasing massive data sets of compromised personal information, and bribing officials in permissive jurisdictions. The economic impact extends far beyond the immediate victims, driving up the cost of financial services, increasing insurance premiums, and eroding public trust in digital communication and online commerce. The most insidious aspect of 419 fraud is not the financial theft, but the profound violation of human trust. Victims are left grappling with the agonizing realization that their empathy, their generosity, or their aspirations were deliberately weaponized against them. The psychological scars of this betrayal often last long after the financial debts have been settled, leaving individuals permanently cynical, isolated, and fearful of genuine human connection. The fraudsters do not just steal money, they strip away the victim's dignity, leaving a profound sense of shame that prevents many from ever reporting the crime or seeking the support they desperately need. Eradicating the shame associated with falling victim to these scams is a crucial component of a comprehensive prevention strategy. Society must move away from the harmful misconception that only the greedy or the uneducated fall for advance fee fraud. The reality is that these syndicates employ highly sophisticated, psychologically manipulative tactics designed to bypass the rational defenses of intelligent, successful individuals. By fostering an environment of empathy and open communication, victims can be encouraged to come forward, share their experiences, and provide law enforcement with the critical intelligence needed to dismantle these networks. Silence and stigma only serve to protect the perpetrators and ensure a steady supply of future targets. The enduring legacy of this deception is a testament to the complex, often contradictory nature of the human psyche. As long as there are individuals driven by hope, desperation, or a desire for connection, there will be unseen adversaries waiting in the digital shadows to exploit those universal traits. The fight against advance fee fraud is not merely a technological arms race. It is a fundamental struggle to protect the integrity of human trust in an increasingly interconnected and anonymous world. Vigilance, education, and a deep understanding of our own psychological vulnerabilities remain the most effective shields against the timeless, evolving art of the scam.